In this episode of the Part-Timer Podcast, I sit down and talk to Dominic, the voice behind Chicago Brush Lion on Twitter. Talk Blackhawks, as hard as that is. Try and face reality. And if you're thinking it about this team, well, we pretty much say it. All right, here we go. Episode 17 of the Part-Timer Podcast. Let's just put it this way. There's not really anything good you can say about the Chicago Blackhawks, and we'll get into it with Dominic, Chicago Brush Lion, in a second. But first, I wanted to cover a few things. If you're listening to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, if you'd be so kind to leave a rating. I'll be honest with you. This interview, not my best. I'm not even going to throw any excuses. It just was not my best. Dominic pretty much carried the weight here. A lot of incomplete thoughts, I guess, from my part. So I want to thank Dominic for putting me on his back there and taking care of it. But, yeah, wherever you're listening to podcasts, if you'd be so kind to subscribe and follow. A big shout-out to Unwrapped Sports Network. They have a plethora of content that stretches from Los Angeles all the way to Charlotte, North Carolina. I was on a podcast last night that should be out. If it's not already out today, it'll be out soon. We talked a ton of baseball. So if you're interested in getting a baseball fix, just check the Part-Timer Podcast Twitter and look for that link there. A really good conversation, but I want to get in front of something really quick before we get to this interview. One of the questions I was asked on that podcast was, who in the major leagues do you see having possibly a huge step back, or at least taking a step back? Okay, are you ready? I don't think this is going to be the case, but I said the Chicago Cubs. Now, wait a second. Hold on. Hear me out. I just think that the possibilities of the rotation not coming through this year, the bullpen not being great, Craig Kimbrell, I think, is going to be a bounce-back piece. But the unanswered questions lower in the lineup, the experiment of Chris Bryant hitting leadoff, I think they're going to be fine. I think they're going to contend for the division title. Is it possible they take a step back with the variables that I just listed? It is. And that's what I meant. So no one cut my head off. No one call me an idiot. I'm just trying to be as realistic as possible about the state of the Chicago Cubs, and more content about them on the Part-Timer Podcast will be coming in the next couple weeks as spring training gets going. So without further ado, let's have the robot tell you who we're talking to.
And now Chicago Brush Lion.
Joining me on the podcast now, you may have seen him with a helmet on, maybe a Jordan jersey, a Blackhawks jersey on a statue. Chicago Brush Lion. The voice behind the account is Dominic. Dominic, man, thanks for joining me on the podcast on short notice, and hopefully this won't be too painful.
No, greetings and salutations, my friend.
So I've actually, we followed each other for quite some time now. I think we've been through all 3 championships together, and it's a much different time now, unfortunately, for Blackhawks fans. So without beating a dead horse, because we're at the point in the season where a lot of this stuff is pretty self-explanatory. This team is very inconsistent. In my opinion, they're just straight up not good. And we're at the point where we have to really start making tough decisions. And by we, I mean the armchair general managers and owners. But what's your current state of the Blackhawks right now? it's got to feel a little bit worse after that Rangers loss last night.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I just finished my Costco-sized bottle of Pepto-Bismol. The amount of indigestion we had to endure on that road trip. Yeah, it's not. You've come to the realization that everything that's happened, that they're more. You wanted to really cling to it, that they were going to be a bubble team, and the bubbles really popped. I think after that road trip, you're taking they only got 2 points out of possible 10. Maybe it doesn't leave a good taste in your mouth. I mean, some of those games, the effort was there. It just either came too late or they weren't able to convert. So, yeah, I think at this point, I mean, I don't know. Everybody wants to sit there and listen to the rumor mill about who's on the way out, who could be going, who we'd like to, chase after with pitchforks and torches. But yeah, we're getting into a grind here. We have to face the reality that they're pretty much going to be sellers, or everything's going to get duct taped together till the summer, and it's going to blow up from there. That's a
good point. I'm in the camp of, look, the deadline is Monday. Let's start to unfold here. I'm a big fan of dealing Saad if you can. I think his value is really high right now. I'm a big fan of dealing Crawford, although there's speculation that Robin Lehner won't be the guy because they just can't seem to get anything done. Maybe it's a good idea to deal him and figure out the goalie situation in the next couple months here. I just don't know. Unfortunately, it's extremely hard to predict what this front office is going to do, but I could totally see them trying to duct tape things until the summer, and instead of making valuable acquisitions at this deadline when their player values are somewhat high, they stand pat and try and make deals in the offseason. Re-signing Corey Crawford's a thing that maybe could happen. Again, I'm in the camp of if you let him walk, that's a terrible business decision.
Absolutely.
But I just, it's one of those things where the thing that frustrates me the most is Stan Bowman is kind of unpredictable. You could sit here and say, hey, listen, trading Brandon Saad would be a good idea. And he would go ahead and sign him to an extension. Or signing Dominic Kubalik right now, like today, would be a good idea. And instead of doing what we would think as the logical thing, Stan Bowman waits till the end of the year. Dominic Kubalik goes on some stretch of like 10 goals in 10 games, and instead of giving him $3 million a year, he's giving him $5 million. So like it's an extremely unpredictable front office, and quite honest, I'm not sure if he makes it through the summer. My gut says yes, but I think there is a possibility that he, along with Mr. Colleton, don't have a job by June.
Oh man, you can set up a whole side parade just for those two exits right there. I think right at this current juncture. If I can get my hamster in my head to start spinning the wheel, I'm going to try to touch on a little bit of everything that you just said. First of all, yes, Stan Bowman, Stanbo, the Fire Stan hashtag. Stan is very well proven that he's a bean counter, and an average one at that. I know that me, as of the armchair attendees on the Twitterverse or whatnot, none of us would want that job. And that there's no glory in it, and you give him an ounce of sympathies. But I feel that he's very much more of an accountant as opposed to you would question maybe a hockey IQ, especially with some of the trades and the albatross contracts, prematurely, not premature, unpremature. So that's one bullet point. The other one was, yes, signing Kubalik. I think that realistically, signing him now is probably could be good. I mean, not necessarily. I'm not sure what his rights are, if he's restricted or he'd be unrestricted. I think trying to give him some sort of pellet for his performance would be good. I think that's a positive thing because right now that team is still kind of there's some of the older fellows on there, Smith and Carpenter, and other veterans that have been around for the last decade here. You kind of try to enforce the youth. I think with the goaltending situation, I don't hide it that I'm very pro Corey Crawford. I think he's a stud, and he's the Rodney Dangerfield of hockey in Chicago. The guy gets no respect. He is, though, at that point where I think his big contract deal is definitely done. He's not going to get signed to another blockbuster deal, long-term deal, anything with substantial money. But I do think that trying to deal Leonard, and Leonard is a personality where it can be good. It's good to hear something refreshing, but he can also be a detriment. You start building a little bit of a media diva in the locker room. It kind of can upset the apple cart a little bit. So I would think that with him and only being 1 year and being very vocal about not taking discounts and wanting to get his worth, probably would set off a lot of red flags in the front office. Say, well, maybe we can try, but this guy seems really deep in his convictions and notorious Blackhawks organization. That's not something that comes very receptive, I don't think, traditionally. So they might be a good idea to shop him, even though, in my opinion, he hasn't looked as good as billed. I mean, try to get something in return for him, because you can always sign Crawford to a cap-friendly deal, and then you have Bealey on the bubble. So, I mean, he'd be the next man up to come and back up, unless you find somebody in the free agent market that wants to come. But I think with, not to ramble off too much off topic, but you remember the days when players came and they were eager to come to Chicago. Chicago was the big buzzword. They want to come here. They want to play here. It was very inviting.
Sure.
You don't hear that much anymore. It's very quiet.
Well, no, and I think the reason for that, I mean, look at the coaching staff. Like, we're sitting here. We went from a Hall of Famer, and you could argue this until you're blue in the face, but in my opinion, the firing of Quenneville was premature. I just think, look, other than Mark Crawford, and I know the history of him is a little touchy, but from a hockey coach, like from my perspective, he is the most respectable hockey coach on that behind that bench, and
absolutely,
I can't put my finger on the fact that people want to come and play for Jeremy Colliton, and I don't even know one of the assistant coaches' name. I have no idea. I know Sheldon Brookbank, Jeremy Colliton, and Mark Crawford. The Tomas, whatever the hell his name is, just hearing him talk, I don't think he has a high hockey IQ. I don't think any of those coaches are earning the respect of any of those players, and I've been saying it ever since Colliton got hired. He's not the guy. He's too laid back to be a coach in Chicago.
I would agree.
He's not fiery enough. When he had the press conference after the Rangers game, when he goes, it's disappointing. I can't picture him going into the locker room after the game and tearing that entire team apart because they deserved it. I can't picture it. I can picture him giving some BS speech about, this is just another thing that we have to deal with. This is adversity, and it's about how we come back on Friday and how we practice tomorrow. No, this isn't the time to be like, we tried. This is about, hey, you have 2 or 3 of the best hockey players in the past decade on your team, and by the way, they're still playing at a good clip. You're wasting time. So it's about getting your players ready, and I don't believe he's done that ever. I don't think
That's a good
the
bullet.
games that the Blackhawks have won this year, like in Arizona, that was a giant win. That was the biggest win of the season. I give zero credit, and people can give me flack for this, but I give zero credit to Jeremy Colliton. I think that was all on the players' effort on the ice. I think that has nothing to do with what the coaches did before the game or what the memo was coming back from break. I 100% dislike Jeremy Colliton. I don't like the way he talks. I don't like the way he does anything. And I could be wrong. Maybe I'm just a hater, but from what I've seen, I don't think that, back to your point, coming to Chicago and playing for Jeremy Colliton is on anyone's list.
Oh, you hit the nail on the head. And here's my thing about Coach Noob, as I've referred to him many a time. He doesn't prepare them. That's one thing. Some of these games, like the optional morning practices now, it's become a really, you have to pound the sass out of these guys at a certain point, because I get it. Some days there's maintenance days, like Quenneville was good for the optional skates, give the guys a day off. He knew when to ride them. He knew when to give them slack, and for the most part, with the exception of the Q blenders, everything the record kind of stands for itself.
Sure.
But I think with you're exactly right. I think Colliton has lost the room at a certain. I'm not 100% positive. I can't give you the exact moment, but I know that his style, again, is day and night to Quenneville. We're talking the second winningest coach in NHL history. And at first, albeit, Hugh grew on me. I didn't like him at first. I was very a pro Savard guy. I thought that first championship was won with a lot of Dale talent, and savvy backbone. I mean, look at the two young stars who are now the almost the contractual burden to the team. They're the superstars, and they're guys you wouldn't want on any other team. But they've kind of horse-collared the rest of the budget. But he brought those guys under their wing, and Kane, very similar to a Savardian style, or hockey styles that it's bringing Q along finally grew on me. So I said, okay, now we're on to something. And everybody else, you go through the ebb and flow. But for Colliton in general, being a 1 year in Rockford, and most things in Chicago sports, you can't hang your hat on 1 year. You got to have a couple of years lined up to say, okay, it wasn't a fluke, and they're kind of gelling together. And I feel like his style in the beginning was a little bit different than the guys we're used to, and some of the veterans weren't sold on him. And now we're getting into the second complete season with him, and there's no improvement. There's nothing you can hang your hat on to say that they're better. I mean, I suppose first year the defense was awful. Now it's just optional. Guys are just double screening our goalies, just not in position, bad turnovers. I mean, the Gustafson thing, I believe by all means, give him a one-way ticket to, nowhere. That's perfectly good. I've referred to him as the Fulton Reed.
Yeah, I know. I know a lot of people wanted to deal him last year, and I was I didn't really have an opinion on it because I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure what he was going to turn into. Obviously, last year he had a hell of a year, a career year, and I just wasn't sold on dealing him. And now it's bit the team in the ass. So I don't know, man. It's one of those things where you look at this team and they're young, and that's kind of the only excuse I can give them is, aside from the veterans, you have a lot of young guys who are just trying to find their way into this league. But really, the two only young guys that I'm impressed with are Kirby Dach and Dominic Kubalik. Those are the only two guys. I mean,
yeah.
Highmore isn't the guy for me. I don't like Highmore. I don't like David Kampf. I have a hard time believing that this team is very close based on the coaching style and the players that are in the system now. I just kind of feel like the mixture it's not mixing.
No.
Colladin has to go. His system has to go. But I will say this. I guess I'll loosen the strangle on Colladin a little bit. He's dealt with. So Seabrook's been out. Although we know that whole relationship. That's a dumpster fire.
Yeah,
Calvin DeHaan. I mean, I liked Calvin DeHaan's play.
I did too.
Unfortunately, injuries happen. Now, the Andrew Shaw thing. Initially, I was happy to have him back, and then as soon as the season started, I'm like, oh man, this is not good. He had a great year last year, but he's not. His role is different here in Chicago than it was in Montreal, and I just don't think that he was a good acquisition based on where the team sits. Maybe it was bringing in a quote-unquote veteran presence who's got a tougher attitude to kind of carry the load when Taves and Kane are struggling a little bit. But I just have a hard time believing, and this is why I said when they lost to Boston, and I'm trying to tie the ends on this rant here, when they lost to Boston, I said, well, the Blackhawks suck. And I got the most ridicule I've gotten all season, and it was a stupid thing to say, and Boston's a really good team, and I wasn't discounting Boston. I wasn't discounting the fact that they got a point against Boston, but there has been multiple occasions, and by multiple I mean 10 plus games where the Hawks could have easily won these games, and they just don't have it. They just don't. I don't know what it is. They're playing on a lower level than the rest of the league, and the reason why their record isn't like Ducks bad or Kings bad is because we have Taves and Kane and unbelievable goaltending all year long, and you have Kubalik having an unbelievable rookie year. If they weren't having the years, I mean, think about it. We've only had. You want to put statistics on the line? We only have two really okay players, and that's Patrick Kane and Dominic Kubalik. Other than that, pretty mediocre.
Yeah, there's a lot of career AHLers, it seems like, on this team for now. I mean, there might be some guys that, with better leadership, could morph into something that would be very serviceable. Maybe not all-stars, but at least solid character guys that you could count on to show up every night. And the big thing, the problem has always been is that the pipeline from the minors to the majors has always been kind of plugged up, or talent that doesn't get enough of an evaluation before they're shipped out of town. And trying to touch on going back on some of your points with the Andrew Shaw reacquisition. I would stand with a lot of the other people, fans, that would say that it's getting kind of old at this point, that you can't always recapture what used to be. And unfortunately, I like the idea of reacquiring Shawzy with the grit factor. There's not enough spine on this team to play and standing up for their other teammates, for sticking up for their goaltenders. I mean, and I've said it a billion times, I guess being a broken record, but Corey Crawford, I feel, is the most run-at goalie the entire NHL. I mean, and look at some of these health issues that have happened in game, or concussion assessments and things. I feel like a lot of the other teams get a little too close in on him, and it takes a little bit of contact, and not just like a little, like a brush, like he's taking full force. It's any of the guys that be protecting the last line of defense there. But Shaw in general, this is great, good player, but he also taken a bunch of stupid penalties at inopportune times that really, and the penalty kill hasn't been able to bail him out all the time. So it's bad things like that too. So,
Yeah, I've always said that the penalty kill this year has taken a wild step forward compared to last season, which I'll definitely credit the coaching staff for that, and I'll also credit the acquisitions. Zach Smith is one of the guys that I really think has stepped into a valuable role. Connor Murphy is another guy that I think was undervalued until this season, but
Yeah.
I just kind of think that when you talk about Corey Crawford and just kind of the way this season has played out and his past injuries and just people kind of running into him a little bit, I just think that there are a lot of Crawford haters out there that you again, it's another thing that you could argue until you're blue in the face with, but I think you're right. I think aside from Dennis Gilbert, there isn't anyone on that blue line that's going to be in front of that goalie to give a couple shots to the opposing team's forward, or take a good penalty for sticking up for our goalies. It's just this team feels very soft, and I hope it changes. I hope that in the next couple days here we see some change. I hope Stan Bowman doesn't ignore anybody's phone calls, because I think every single offer has some initial value to it, and depending on how these conversations go, I think you have to start moving pieces. The biggest thing for me, because I'm a little concerned with the transitioning into the kind of transactionary period of this team, what I'm concerned with is you have a good opportunity for Robin Leonard to be your long-term goalie, like 3-4 years.
Yeah.
But anything past that, I think, is the team loses leverage. You could have a team-friendly deal and it be beneficial to the goalie. However, no matter what you say about how Robin Leonard's play is and how the defense is in front of him, his last, 3-4 performances are lowering his stock. So
Yeah.
I think him asking for, like, I'm not taking any pay cuts, blah, 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 the Hawks might want to think about doing everything they can to sign him long term, because I don't think that there's a better option. I'm a huge Crawford supporter, but his age is the biggest variable. I don't think going into next season with having a Leonard Crawford tandem is going to be the best thing. I just think that Crawford's performances in the past week, ever since coming back from break, sure, he gave up some soft ones here and there, but I really believe that he has some good value going into this deadline. I would hate to see him traded, but this goes back to what you were saying about, you can't hold on to old things and try and rekindle them. We're going to have to deal with the fact that Crawford may get traded by Monday. And if that happens, I just hope that Bowman doesn't do what he normally does and either scare the team out of a deal or not take the deal because he doesn't think it's good enough. There has to be an evaluation of talent in return. And what I would really like to see is, no matter what deal gets done, whether it's at the deadline or in the summer, there has to be, aside from goaltending, there has to be an effort to stockpile forward prospects. There just has to be. There's not enough there.
I think it's funny you mentioned that, because there was, I think most of us were familiar with the ways that Stan was doing in his initial tenure, about he was really stockpiling those picks. We used to have a lot of picks.
Yeah.
And those turned into players, or those turned into bargaining chips to acquire other players or whatnot. And we had a lot of those. And I think recently, in the last handful of years, he hasn't had the as many, bag of tricks, much leverage to be like, hey, we'll give you this player and this round pick for so and so, and it hasn't happened. The well's gone dry. So I noticed that it's something that seemed to benefit the team initially, and now they're not around, and now we're getting into some of the players are maybe getting longer in the tooth, or the performance year to year has been inconsistent, and what do you do? Where do you go from there?
Well, I'll tell you one player that I really, aside from Artemi Panarin, I'll tell you one player I think would be pretty effective on this team, and I don't think a lot of people talk about him enough, is Vinny Hinostroza. I liked him when he was here, and I just think he's able to put the puck in the back of the net. I think he's able to play defense in the defensive zone. But it's one of those things where I just feel like Bowman tries to outsmart everybody, and to me that's a problem. I think you have to have some savviness to it. I mean, these are quote unquote sales meetings, but at the same time you have to take a step back and go, okay, what's really going to be what's realistically going to be beneficial for this team? And I mean, they've traded away a lot of players. I mean, Artemi Panarin is the biggest one. Nick Leddy was a great defender. Nicholas Hjalmarsson. I'll tell you this. I agree with the Hjalmarsson parting, because he would have wanted, and he was demanding far too much. That would have been another crippling contract. So I'm happy they did that. But then again, you can sit here and say, well, Brent Seabrook's contract is just bonkers. So what do you think?
If you look at Hammer,
go ahead.
Sorry about that. No. If you look at Hammer, the poor guy, it kind of did at the time for the salary cap at the moment. They didn't necessarily need to move his contract, but poor guy, he goes out to the desert and basically falls apart. Like the Iron Man Street kind of just disappears. The guy kind of crumbles on every front. It's just feel bad for him, and I don't think he's played a whole lot of games over a couple seasons for them, because he's been out with some sort of ailment. So and the Vinny Hinostroza deal, that was the casualty of the Hossa salary purge, and I felt like that. I went to see him that year at the training camp and for the Hawks, and he looked really good. Like he started really coming into his own. It started looking good. They put him in a line with Kane. It started looking good. And you're like, oh, like maybe his number's finally up. And again, away he went. Like they made the deal extra sweet to get rid of the big shadow there with Hossa not being able to come back. So and here we are. It'd be nice to have somebody with that kind of speed.
I'm interested to see what this, aside from injuries, I'm interested to see what this season would have been like and what next season will be like when DeBrincat is on, when he's not scoring 13 goals or 12 goals or whatever he has, when he's scoring 30, 35 goals a year, when Kane is 30 plus, when Taves is 20, 25 plus. Like we have pieces on the team that are very valuable and that I think you can easily build around. It's just not happening. And I think it has a lot to do with the system. I really do. I mean, these players put up wild numbers last year. Taves had a career year. DeBrincat had a career year. And now we're seeing a wild fall off. And could it be that these players are just taking steps back? Yes. But I have a hard time believing that it's just the players. I have a hard time believing that time heals all wounds, and next year with Colliton, it's going to be better. I just think it's Colliton.
I think the first year with Colliton, at least in my view, was, it kind of pulled it. We'll never know, not being on insiders inside the team, but I would speculate that, a lot of guys weren't sold on him, and the season was extra bad because guys weren't really trying. And then they reached that point there towards the end of the year where it was sort of like, wow, we've laid down like dogs for most of the season, like can't do it anymore. So let's try to at least go out on a good note. And they kind of put a little bit together. But this year, it's been a struggle. I think that there's just, and the schedule itself, I believe, hasn't necessarily helped them either.
No. No, yeah,
It's
it's been,
almost like a baseball-like schedule. They're playing a lot of back-to-back, so many games within, a business week. It's just, and usually, the Hawks would come out like on a back-to-back game, and they might be good the first night. The second night, they seem to be a lot stronger. Like they didn't get that jet lag, and it's sort of like, well, spin the wheel of misfortune. What are we gonna get tonight?
yeah, I think
Yeah,
the
a lot of
argument.
guys are snake bit.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. That goes back to the offense isn't where it needs to be. But a lot of people, and by a lot of people, I mean a few people, say that, well, you're gonna this is the point of the season where you're playing back-to-back nights, long travel. You don't have your legs. I mean, these are these short short turnarounds are the reasons for their slow starts, and it's easy for me to argue that these slow starts and these failure to finish games have been going on all year, and I just have again, I have a hard time believing that it's on the players. This is about going into the second intermission, and as a coach, now be the first one to say I have zero coaching experience, but as a player, I just feel like when you go into a second intermission, this isn't about the coach going, okay, well, third period, let's just keep doing what we're doing, and let's I don't know, let's just cruise to a win. If I was a coach, and this could be wrong, but if I was a coach and I'm up 6-2, I'm in the locker room going, give me 10. I want 10. Give me 10 goals. Like, we're not sitting back. The third period that the Blackhawks play when they have a lead reminds me of a prevent NFL defense. It reminds me of, hey, let's just bank on our goalie doing a hell of a job, and let's bank on our defense doing a decent job and just kind of treading water. And then, if we have a chance in the offensive zone, well, if we can cash in, that's just a bonus. I just think hockey's the type of sport where time of possession is far more important than it seems.
It's the dreaded 3-goal lead.
Yeah, and the Hawks have a wonderful reputation of the third period just being abysmal. Like, I'm to the point where I don't even want, like, if we have a lead, I don't even want to watch because there it goes. It's down the drain, and it's just frustrating. So I think I beating a dead horse is an overstatement, is an understatement. So I'll leave you with this final question. We're sitting, if I'm not mistaken, still 8 points. I haven't looked at any of the scores of the standings tonight. But we could quite possibly be 10 points out. So the season's over. Like, let's just agree on that. But over the next couple days here before the deadline, who do you think, player-wise, skater-wise, who do you think has the highest trade value and is a realistic possibility of getting traded before Monday?
Ooh. If I can be honest with you, it's probably Mike Gapsky, probably the Gapper. I mean, nobody there is, you're going to get a used puck bag, a couple of jock straps, and a, autographed poster from 1984. I mean, it really, I guess it's the easiest one to single out. Who's the easiest to punt? And I think you could try to get something for Gustafsson, maybe call up a guy from the AHL. You bring, you could get Gilbert back up. And Gilbert, I'll comment on this guy. This guy reminds me of like a 90s, the era of 90s enforcer. I mean, he's got the name, big boy, he's got the size, he's got that big fro tucked in that brain bucket. Like, the guy's got the nostalgia factor. But realistically, you bring somebody, you can call somebody up and try to get them to finish out, maybe get some reps up with the big league. But it's difficult. Everybody could be expendable. I mean, at this point, I think our definition of the core has definitely changed. I don't even think you could necessarily say there's a core, because I think everybody could have their price realistically in business.
Yeah, it's a good
like
point.
The NHL. But yeah, I mean, honestly, I mean, you can pretty much just shake your Magic 8 Ball and kind of just go for it at that point. Yeah, I think Gustafsson has shown that he's not necessarily NHL level, or at least he's not going to gel in this system. So I think you could try to maybe get some picks, get something for him. I mean, I said we can have an entire show about the goalie situation. I mean, I'm stretching for it. Totally get down to that war of attrition. But yeah, I think right now, I mean, Gustafsson would be be for me. Unfortunately, there's just too many players in that third and fourth line where you need your character guys to go up against the big number 1 and number 2 lines for friction. I think that there's just too many part-time players on that team. When I say part-time, I mean guys that are on and off the healthy scratch list.
Sure, yeah.
So I mean, we're really at that point where you have the first couple of lines, and then you do have some dangle bait to put out there. Saad. I like the Saad father, and when his first tour here, I mean, everybody was calling him the mini Hossa, the two-way strong player, and I cautioned everybody when he came back. I said, he's having some good years in Lumbus, but with the big cannon shots and everything else. But you be careful what you wish for, because a guy may not be the same guy that you sent off that came back. I mean, he had to deal with the insanity of torts and that market there, and they had reasonable better team than previous years and for them. But you come back and you wonder what the guy's gonna have, and he's been pretty quiet. I mean, he's shown flashes of himself previously, but I think at this point, maybe the way he's played this year, that he's been doing good lately. Maybe you try to see how serious people are takers. But for Stan Bowman to make a smart hockey move is difficult. If you're looking at the teams that he's interacted with here in the last few years, at least the post-15 fallout, we're not getting a lot of guys from winning cultures, and I think that says a little bit too. Like you can't just hang on, we're coming to the Hawks and like what the Hawks were. No, you have to assess what the team is looking at this year. And some of the guys we're getting and the organizations we're dealing with, it's a lot of chances. So I don't know. Like I said, shake the Magic 8 Ball. Let's strap in, I guess.
That's a good point.
We're going to be on the rumble strip here for the next couple weeks.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think he's just looking. A lot of times he's looking for a bargain, and a lot of that has to do with these crippling contracts. So we'll see what happens. But one final question, and a very short-term question. So it shouldn't be too difficult. I know we've asked some pretty tough questions here. Tonight.
I know, I'm trying to be concise.
Yeah. And
180 characters.
Tonight, the Hawks play their second home game after that 5-game road trip, and forget about points here. But what's the outcome tonight when the Predators are in town?
Oh, the Perds, snaggletooths. I think they're having their own struggles too, and with Rene, having a foot and mouth special with his comments about previously playing the Hawks and getting lit up. I guess it's sort of, the double knockdown rule. So both contenders fall to the mat, and he starts a standing 10 count, because honestly, I haven't followed much of their hockey lately, some of the divisional hockey lately. But yeah, I guess it's sort of, at this point, whoop-de-doo.
Right. Yeah. That's a pretty good way to summarize it. Well, if you need any Pepto, I'm sure there's your local Walgreens or CVS that you can head to. I'm pretty sure they sell the larger bottles on Amazon. So if
I'm switching to Malort now.
Oh no.
Malort o'clock tonight.
Oh boy. All right, man. Well, Dominic, Chicago Brush Lion, man, I appreciate your time, and let's just try and tread some water here and not pull all of our hair out before the season ends.
Absolutely. No, it's been a pleasure, Josh. Thank you. And hey, I'm always here for a round 2.